What do you do on Sundays?
We talk about Cate Blanchett, the acting, the costumes, the awards, but mostly the Blanchett of it all.
I'm not acting.
You think this is a love affair?
I saw you, Erica. Meeting in the middle.
This is Sundays with Cate, and I'm your host, Murtada Elfadl.
Time is the thing. Time is the essential piece of interpretation. You cannot start without me.
You want to dance the mask? You must service the composer.
Welcome to Sundays with Cate, the podcast series about the films of Cate Blanchett and our addendum mini season celebrating Tár. This is sort of our final episode, discussing Tár until maybe January. We will do another episode. If Tár is up for awards and Oscars, which I think it will be, we will do a Tár awards episode, but that will be sometime in January. But for now, we are following the US release dates. So we had 2 episodes about Todd Field's movies before the movie was released. We had 1 episode for the limited release in New York and LA. We had 1 episode when the movie went wide all over the US. And now this episode drops the week where the movie is available on VOD. And to our listeners not in the US, I have gotten messages from you about the fact that you are not able to see the movie until January or February and not able to listen to the podcast. I'm very sorry. I apologize. But just look at it this way. When you see Tár, you will have 3-4 episodes from Sundays with Cate for you to listen. So it will be a companion piece, maybe even longer than Tár itself in time. So it is my pleasure to welcome back to the podcast for the second time to discuss Tár, writer and critic Manish Mathur. Manish, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me back. I'm so excited. I've been following your Tár miniseries, and it's been so great just to have you back on podcast feeds talking about Cate Blanchett and, of course, this really wonderful, mysterious movie. So thanks for having me again.
Of course, Manish. I am so excited to have you. Long-time listeners of the podcast will remember that Manish and I talked about Cinderella, which I think is a couple of years ago now. It's been a while, but I'm so happy to have you back and to discuss Tár. And you had an idea for this podcast, which was kind of one of those moments. I thought about it too, but and then I got your message and you were like, have you thought of this? And I was like, yes, let's do it. This is a great idea. So why don't you tell our listeners what sort of our theme is for this episode of Sundays with Cate and Tár?
Yeah, so, Tár, of course, is, directed by Todd Field. And, he's, of course, a very established filmmaker, but he also had an acting career. And one of his, I think, most major roles is in Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut. But when I watched Tár for the first time, I really did notice a lot of Kubrickian elements. And I think that's partially because I had mistakenly thought that they had this like mentorship relationship. So I thought of it a lot, and Eyes Wide Shut is one of my favorite films of all time. My favorite Kubrick film, a movie that I watch every holiday season. So I'm gonna. So I really enjoy the movie. I've seen it so many times, and I had just been watching a lot of Kubrick movies just in general, like filling in blind spots that I hadn't seen, like Barry Lyndon and Full Metal Jacket, and of course rewatching, favorites like The Shining, 2001, and Spartacus. So I'm really, he was on the brain, and so when I watched Tár for the second time, I really picked up on a lot of, I think, like thematic connections, some scene similarities, and really. I think some just like undercurrents of, echoes between, Tár and Stanley Kubrick's films, especially Barry Lyndon and Eyes Wide Shut. And I think even The Shining a little bit.
Todd Field was in Eyes Wide Shut. I think you're burying the lead. He was Nick Nightingale.
Yeah, he was, of course.
The guy at the piano in
Yeah.
Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's one of the roles I think that he's most known for as an actor. And that's a great movie. So I really think that I think Kubrick has a lot of influence on this movie, whether it's subconscious or deliberate. But yeah, I think that connection I really did inspire me to really think about these two films and these two filmmakers in tandem with each other.
Yes, and of course the other connection is that Cate Blanchett herself was in Eyes Wide Shut, which is something that we didn't know at the time, but it was discovered when Vulture did an oral history, I think about 3 years ago now, and she dubbed in one of the women, I think the main woman at the orgy, who sort of like tries to save the Tom Cruise character by sacrificing herself.
When I watched the movie again after hearing that, I was like, of course it's Cate Blanchett. Her voice is so distinct, but I think that scene in that film is so absorbing that you kind of forget the outside world when you're watching it. So I don't think I put it together. But then once it's like, well, of course it's her. It sounds just like her.
It's so funny you say that because
really great performance.
I watched the movie last night again, Eyes Wide Shut, and I could not I could hear a faint sort of Cate in that voice, but also I think it's a little bit muffled. They're doing some effects because the character wears a mask throughout all her scenes, and also it's Cate from 1999 or probably 1998 at the beginning of her career, so her voice is probably different than the one we know now from Tar and all the recent films.
And what I love about that is that it sounds like it's from a tape recorder, like it's muffled also, but it's very, it's not like a, like a voice role for like an animated movie where it does, it's so detached and it's really quite, it's so unsettling, her role and how much of that, her sacrifice, is that theatrics, is that to scare Tom Cruise, is it real? Is she the woman from the Christmas party earlier in the scene? Is she not? It's not the same actress, but I think it's meant to be like confusing the two roles. I mean, it's very fascinating, that movie.
Yes.
And I think just in the way that I think Tar is very fascinating in this way, where you're just not quite sure what's happening and you're not quite sure how to really take it all in. And you could read the plot description and a lot does happen, but then when you're watching the film, it seems like so much is unsaid or just off screen, or between the scenes there's a lot happening. So it's really quite, I think Tar is also a very unsettling film.
Yeah, it is. I agree. That's a big similarity between the two. Yes. One thing I want to say about Cate and Eyes Wide Shut before we move on is that the story behind that is that the actress who played the role was British, so she didn't have an American accent. So they needed an American accent. And this all happened after Kubrick had died. So whoever was doing the sound sort of like was asking to find somebody with an American accent, not necessarily an American. And Nicole Kidman suggested Cate, which is funny that they got another Australian to play, to dub this role in an American accent. So anyway, that's the connection between Todd, Cate, and Eyes Wide Shut. And then we will dig into sort of like the thematic connections between the two films. One thing in the many interviews that Todd Field has been doing, and I know you've read a few and I've read a few and listened to a couple of podcasts, he said he never met Cate during that time because obviously he was on set acting in the movie and all her work was done post. So they never met. They never knew of each other. And he didn't even know that she dubbed that role, just like the rest of the world, until it was revealed three years ago or so. So Manish, let's start with you've already told us a little bit about Tar and Eyes Wide Shut, but tell me a little bit more about your impression of Tar. Yes, no, what you liked about it, and then we can dig into the thematic correlations with Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah, I mean, I love the movie. It's shot straight to the top of my best of the year list. It's such a towering movie. It's just so big. Like there's so many really impressive close-ups, especially of Cate Blanchett, and there's been a lot of discussion about like, well, is this her best performance? Is she repeating what she's doing? And I don't think I think she's, best, whatever. That's not, no one can really determine that because we all have our own subjective reaction. But I do think she's doing something totally different. I mean, the way she just like eats the movie up, and and just, I mean, it starts even from the beginning with her New Yorker interview scene. I mean, I just don't even know how to talk about it. It's just the way I think what's interesting about Tar is that it's actually a very playful performance for her in terms of like as an actor, because she's doing so much in all these scenes. She's playing so many different, she's modulating her voice in different ways. She's emphasizing some words and de-emphasizing other words. She's holding on pauses, and she's just really playing with the dialogue in a way that I find really interesting. For such a studied actress, who's always putting so much effort and thought and contemplation into her roles, I think her performance as Tar, it feels very spontaneous and effortless, even though I know she's done a lot of hard work. I mean, of course she has.
Yeah.
But the famous Juilliard scene. I mean, it's such a playful scene, the way that she's, walking around the set and moving all around, and just how the way she says like, okay, just whatever, when the student is
with her hand
talking about his own. Yeah, exactly. Like it's very funny. And I think Tar will reveal itself to be, I think, more darkly funny the more you watch it. I think the first time I saw it, I'm like, I thought this was like a very like deep expose about cancel culture or whatever. And then the second time I saw it, I'm like, oh no, it's actually something very different. And the more that I hear about it, it's like, that's really just the window dressing. That's just the layer of the film. That's one layer of the film, but there's so much under it. And and just the way that I think one of the major themes of your podcast is how well she works against all these other actresses. And of course, Nina Haas and, Nomi Merlant, they're established, they're successful actresses. But even these, musicians who are in these like for first movie roles, I mean, she's acting so well against them, and she brings out so many of their strengths as an actor. I mean, there's such a tight ensemble, even for a lot of actors who don't act regularly for their careers. And just the way that this movie has such a really strong pace to it. It's about 2 hours and 40 minutes long, but it really goes by really fast.
Yeah, you never feel it.
Because there are a lot of these, standout, showcase scenes that run for a few minutes, but there are also a lot of really small, short scenes that really just kind of like are very snappy. So I really appreciated the editing of this movie as well. And yeah, I mean, I just think it's she's such a fascinating character, because you love her, you worship her, you're impressed by her, but then she's also sickening at times. She's also very manipulative. And it's just fascinating. I mean, you hardly ever see women characters in this kind of role. And it's really quite an achievement, I think, for Todd Field, for Cate Blanchett, for everyone involved.
I could not agree more. So let me respond to some of the things that you said. So in the first scene, I think the New Yorker scene, what I loved about it is that it's Cate playing Lydia playing Tar, because she's putting on airs in that scene, right? Like Lydia is putting on airs to become Tar with the apostrophe in the name, to be like this, the top of the cultural heap, the woman who everybody looks to. Like, she's completely unnatural, which is what that part of it asks for it, because she's putting on airs. And I think it's so funny to take that scene where she's so studied, but also just so fascinating to watch, and the scene right after it where she's flirting with one of the attendees at that Gopnik talk, and then she's putting on a different air there. She's like the air of like, oh, I'm smart and intellectual, but I'm also emotional, unfuckable, look at me. And it's so funny to sort of like contrast these two, of like the unattainable cultural genius who is godlike. And then 2 minutes later, she's like, no, I want to fuck this woman, so let me make sure that she gets that too. And it's as you watch the movie, and this is I went again to see it, so this was my first time. I thought that scene was the woman the seduction, kind of a seduction scene with Naomi Merlant in the back just rolling her eyes because she's seen this dance so many times.
Right.
I thought it was so funny, to your point about this being so funny and comedic. And that scene is just like seeing somebody who, as at that point, we don't know yet. You just think that maybe, oh, she's just like, she's trying, she likes this woman, whatever. We don't even know that she's married. Oh, actually, we do know she's married. It was revealed to us then. But it's only later that it's revealed to us that she's kind of a predator. And then once that sort of revelation comes later on, that scene takes on a completely different interpretation in hindsight. So I think this is why this movie plays, to your point, on so many levels. And the more you see it, you discover things the second or third time. And to the point you were making about how long it is, but it's also so lovely. I don't want anybody to say, I hate the thing of people online where they say movies are long and movies are terrible. I'm like, if you like a movie, it's not because it's long and short. It is because it worked for you. So the length of the movie doesn't matter. It is true that when a bad movie is long, it just exasperates the things that you don't like about it. But so it's winter. The sun goes out at 4 p.m. here in New York. What do you have to do with your time? Go watch Tar for 2 hours and 40 minutes and stop complaining about how long movies are.
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, like a 80-minute movie that's bad is worse to me than a 100-minute, like a 3-hour movie that's bad. Because for some reason, I'm like, 80 minutes goes by so slowly. And, it's quite an experience to go see Tar when it's daylight, and then when you come out of it, it's like pitch dark. It's really, it's also a very unsettling experience.
Yes, totally. We talked a little bit about Tar, but let's talk more about the thematic correlations between Tar and Eyes Wide Shut. So the first thing that came to my mind as like, maybe that's something that Todd Field took from his time with Stanley Kubrick, is sort of, they have this affinity to do these long scenes with long tracking shots and allowing the actors the space to move and act and be in their character for without interruption for a long time. This is, I think, in Tar, most evident in the long Juilliard scene where they did all these tracking shots. I think in Eyes Wide Shut, it's not clear to me. But I think the party scene, for example, the party at the beginning, I thought of that because even though it's not one long tracking shot scene, it's several longer shots than they usually are. And it's sort of like, it starts with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman together, and then they separate and they go their own ways, and it follows both of them while intercutting between them. And it's sort of like driving at the wedge between the characters that's sort of setting up the story. What did you think of the correlations, Manish?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely thought of that as well. The scene that I thought most of was also, I think the two scenes in particular. One is the scene with Sidney Pollack at the end when he's, giving all this dialogue about, what happened at the orgy and whatnot. And that's also a scene where it's very long. They're really moving around the set quite a bit. I think there's a YouTube video that tracks the movement of the scene, or maybe it's an article I read that like does a diagram of all the movements in that scene, and it's really quite impressive to see how much they're really utilizing the space. And I think that's one thing that Tar does really well, is that all these sets are utilized really extremely well, and it seems like every piece of furniture, every inch of carpeting or flooring is used well. And also the scene with Nicole Kidman and when they're smoking pot, that's another scene where they're moving around a lot. And that's a scene where Nicole Kidman is essentially humiliating Tom Cruise for 5 minutes or however long. And that's also like, you look at Tar humiliating the student for that long too, where it's just like, let me just dress down your entire, like your entire life philosophy and how you've really established yourself in the world, and really kind of shake you to your core. In a way that's very funny. That's also another very funny performance of Nicole Kidman, and how the way she modulates her voice and how she gives every line reading so much just like weird, strange energy, and you can't quite figure out. Well, like I've seen that movie with a crowd and they're laughing. I've seen it at home and I'm like terrified of her, and it's you can't quite tell what you're supposed to be, how you're supposed to be reacting. So, and the same thing in Tar, where you're like, I don't know how I'm supposed to react to this like white woman really, tearing down this this young 19-year-old student. It's very funny, it's very thought-provoking, but it's also a very just uncomfortable. I definitely think that there's a lot of similarities there. And yeah, the party scene, I mean, what I think Tar exists in this space with like the very like the cream of the crop, like the elite. Like these are people that we could never dream of meeting. Even if we were to become really successful, there's just a whole different level of success that, and I think Lydia, we'll get this more. I think she's getting to that level, and she's at this place, and they're just like, these like, luxurious apartments and, beautiful, stages, and these ornate, houses and offices, and you just can't quite, imagine what it's like in real life to be in the space of that. And I think, Lydia, as we find out, the fact that she was, Linda from, Staten Island or wherever, you can see there's this element of like social climbing that she's had to do. And I think that also resonates with Eyes Wide Shut, of like Tom Cruise just like having to really, he's striving to be at this level of elite society. He's not even happy where he is now. He has to always be reaching higher and higher, to his downfall and his detriment. So I think that there's just a lot of, this this idea of this rich, elite, very elegant social class, but at the core there's like a rot there. There's so much manipulation, there's so much disposability of all the people there. I mean, it's like you have to claw your way to the top, and whoever is behind you, you just gotta ignore them and just keep moving forward.
Yeah. So what I thought about sort of like the two scenes, the one I mentioned and the one you mentioned, is that the party scene is sort of more like, it's the correlation with Tar is more about the fluidity of the camera work, the sort of allowing the actors the space to work.
Yeah.
And the scene, which I call the confession scene, which is basically the scene where they get high and Nicole Kidman admits to her husband that there was a time there was this other man who she was so attracted to that all she could think about is them fucking, or that man fucking her. And it's sort of like, it sets, that scene to me is like the Juilliard scene, in that it sets the theses of the film. In Eyes Wide Shut, it's sort of like how it's men versus women. It's an abstract discussion that turns personal. And it's the same thing in the Juilliard scene, where they're just discussing basically Bach, and whether Bach can be somebody to admire and play, even though all the bad things that he did. Sort of they're talking about cancel culture per se, but then it turns personal, because then Lydia Tár puts this student kind of on trial in front of all the other students and asks them to evaluate him. So again, it's an abstract discussion that turns very personal and lays the scenes for the movie. And then from then on, I feel like both movies take a swerve and a turn, and what you thought the movie was, whether it's Star or Eyes Wide Shut, becomes something completely different. And then it goes into the rest of the film after the scene, with the audience perception of the story completely changed.
Yeah, that's very true. Very much like, it kind of lets you know what you're in for, and how, like, whatever notions you might have had about the character or about the film itself, it really shifts there. And the film kind of lays out its thesis and its, main central, the main central like trajectory of how it could go forward.
The other thing is that both movies have these recurring dreams or imaginations. In Eyes Wide Shut, Tom Cruise keeps imagining Nicole Kidman and the naval officer she told him about fucking, and that sort of like those imaginations of him are put in different parts of the film throughout his journey until the end. And then in Tar, of course, as the revelations from Tar's past come haunting her, she is also haunted by these dreams where she imagines all the women in her life come back to her, and they are sort of it's not clear what they're doing, but it's very sort of haunting. It's like it feels like a dream, what you see in your dream when there's something weighing on you. So it's all the women. It's Krista, the woman who committed suicide. It's Naomi Merlant, the assistant. It's Nina Haas, her wife. It's even the new cellist that she kind of has a crush on, played by Sophie Kauer. So all of them are in her dreams, and that's also something that keeps recurring in Tar.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned earlier that I think that the cancel culture part of it is just kind of one layer of it. And I think this movie is really about guilt. And I think, all that dream sequence is very terrifying. And also these very like surreal kind of dream logic scenes where, she's jogging, she's hearing the screaming and the metronome and the beeping that she hears constantly. To me, it's that's manifestations of her guilt and her past sins kind of coming back to haunt her. And I think in a similar sense, Eyes Wide Shut is about Tom Cruise coming to terms with the fact that he doesn't really know his wife and her own autonomous desires and her own thought process. That's what's haunting him. And this idea of this the fact that she could even think about sexual satisfaction from another man is always haunting him. And that's kind of that's what these manifestations are in Eyes Wide Shut is, as he's going through this sort of like nightmarish night in New York City, or after the orgy, when he's kind of reconciling with what he saw in the last hour of the film and all these things, you just don't quite know like what's a dream, what's reality, what's haunting him, what's actually there. And that kind of leads me to my kind of next point of connection, is that, one of my favorite things about Eyes Wide Shut is that it seems like all these women in the film kind of look like Nicole Kidman. They have, they're pale, they're redheads, they're kind of statuesque, they're kind of nubile looking. And, whether it's, his patient's daughter played by Marie Richardson, or Vanessa Shaw, or the woman at the orgy, or Amanda at the party, they all just kind of had that same kind of look. They're like doppelgangers of Nicole Kidman's character.
Yeah.
And I felt kind of similar with Tar as well, in that like all the women kind of have the same look, that they're like black or brown hair. They're also kind of pale. They kind of all look like Naomi Merlant and what Nina Haas probably would have looked like when she was younger. Or even the first cellist, she kind of has it similar. And all these women are just kind of like, to me, that represents how, like, in Eyes Wide Shut, these women are all kind of like commodified and objectified. And I think in similar sense of, the women in Tar are also, even there's even some kind of hint towards like, was Sharon, Haas's character, was she just another, woman that kind of got caught up in Lydia's storm and just, like, what was that relationship like at the beginning? I'm curious, just the way, in the sense of like, was Nicole Kidman's character just another, commodified woman that is now married and has risen a little bit above the status of, the models at the party, at the orgy, or
definitely in Eyes Wide Shut, the women look together, and I think more than looking like Nicole Kidman, they all look at this sort of like ideal sort of like model / Barbie doll look of like, the pale skin and the toned body and the breasts and the hair. In Tar, I think there is a sort of like, these people don't go outside the orchestra to fuck. They're like, just want to fuck everybody who they're working with, which is very funny. Like Lydia Tár is married to Sharon, who is the first violinist. She's trying to fuck this new cellist. Obviously she had some relationship with her assistant, who now wants to be a conductor, and the other woman who also wanted to be a conductor. It's very, and there's Anders and his relationship with Sebastian. So they're all fucking each other, and they're not going anywhere outside the orchestra to have sex, which is very funny. But it also sort of like deals with how insular this world is, right? Like this world of this heightened sort of classical music and culture, and it's very insular. It doesn't allow outsiders in, and even the people who are allowed in, I guess they never want to leave. They just want to do everything within the insular world.
I mean, it like I said, like this elitist kind of society has this gravitational pull. It's really quite a fascinating look at this little insular community where everyone's kind of vying for the same positions and everyone's kind of sucked into it and they can't quite get out of it. Even someone as like innocent as Sharon, even she is like, well, you know, I'm not mad at you that you're doing all this. I'm actually mad that I wasn't counseled.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, totally. She's mad that she wasn't part of the conspiracy. Absolutely. I've talked in the podcast, because this is the third episode we do about Tar, about how I think the themes that Tar grapples with are how power corrupts exceptional people, about hierarchy in cultural institutions, and how you get to the top and how you fall and how you maintain the top or maybe fail to maintain. But it is about the hierarchy and the process in those art institutions. What do you think are some of the themes beside these that you felt Tar was dealing with, Manish?
Yeah. I think one of them is it's sort of a takedown of like individualistic exceptionalism.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the most puzzling parts when I first saw it is the opening/closing credits at the beginning. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, you don't really see that ever at the beginning. And you know, when you go see a film, sometimes you stay, but sometimes you also like, you know, I saw a movie the other day and I had to leave right after, and I was like, okay, I got to go during the credits, and you don't really think about it, and you credit the whole film to the filmmaker. And I think Lydia Tár sees her as like she's the force. I mean, she says she controls time. You know, she's
Mm-hmm.
this godlike figure, and I think the opening credits really force you to think about every little piece of the film that was contributed by an individual person, not just
Mm-hmm.
Todd Field. And so I think that this movie shows that, you know, Lydia thinks of herself as this godlike figure, but not only does she have a whole orchestra and a wife that supports her and an assistant that does this and all these people that does that, everyone does all these things for her. The tailor, you know, even Adam Glopnik, he supports her career as well. He's a part of it. Um, this movie is about that and how, you know, these people not only don't get credit, but they're kind of left in her wake in the dust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you know, she's ruined lives. I mean, someone is dead, and you know, the blood is on her hands. You know, not to get dramatic about it, but it's true. And so, and just how she has to really reconcile with that. And how, as someone, she's up on a pedestal, up on the mountain, it's just easy enough for her to fall off the cliff, which is what happens, because there's really, you know, all these people are kind of left in the dust, and there's really no one there to, you know, support her as she comes down, because they're all, you know, she's trampled all over them. So
Yeah.
I think to me that's a really that's a kind of the major theme that I really picked up on my second watch of the film.
Wow, yeah. Yeah, I think that is definitely a theme that it's dealing with, and I love connecting it to the credits because you're forced to sit there for like 3 minutes and
Yeah.
the movie had just started, so you're paying attention, so you're forced to read all these names and sort of their contributions to the film, even if you don't want even if you
And
don't want to read it.
there's even a little spoiler alert for the end, because they credit the music that she plays from the video game or whatever. And of course,
Yeah.
I don't think I even clocked that because I've never played the game. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But it's funny hearing like gamers watch the movie, like, how did Monster Hunter, like, what does that have to do with this movie? Like, what's the payoff there? And then like the ending is such a great, you know.
I didn't even think it was Monster Hunter or a video game. I thought she was at an amusement park, which tells you how
Yeah.
little I know about gaming.
I think she's at some like cosplay, like Comic-Con type conference or something. Like Eyes Wide Shut, this movie ends on a punchline.
Mhm. Yeah, totally. It's a joke. Yeah. I was thinking this last time that I watched Tar, like, who does Lydia Tár remind me of? And, you know, she reminded me of some of the people I used to work with, especially a boss that I used to work with, not in them being inappropriate or anything, but in them sort of, especially in her relationship with her assistant, where she's very dismissive and she doesn't think that highly of her, and so she's easy for her at the end to sort of dismiss her as a robot, as what does she do all day except text. But just to, like, a couple of scenes before that, there is the scene where Nomi Merlan comes in to tell her that Krista has committed suicide, and in that scene she sort of like tries to reassure her and tries to make her feel good about that. And you can see that Lydia Tár is the kind of boss who can be very seductive when she wants you to do her bidding, and she's very nice to you, but she also makes you feel appreciated, makes you feel like you can do no wrong, that you are the best person for the job, all of that. And once you do her bidding, she has no more use for you and just discards you. So I think this is typical of a lot of bosses in corporate America, particularly in my experience anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you thought of anybody who, not necessarily in your life, but just in general, that reminds you of Lydia Tár.
Yeah, I mean, she kind of has that like politician, thing to her. She definitely does have that thing where she knows how to manipulate people and like, use the word seductive. And I think that's a really great phrase for her because she's seductive in a sexual way, of course, but I think she's also seductive just as a person in the way that she can, warp or completely kind of warp your perception of her as she's talking more and more and completely wrap you around her finger. I mean, there's a reason why I think she's kind of become like a meme or like a iconic character, is that like you're enthralled by her. I mean, she's so impressive. This movie, as you mentioned, is like the dark side of genius. And I think that, it is, there's the genius part of that phrase is still very relevant, where you're just like, wow, like imagine just like, I mean, I think one of the best jokes of the film is when she takes Olga to New York, expecting to seduce her officially, and Olga has no interest at all.
Totally.
I think my read of that whole sequence is that she kind of uses Lydia for a trip to New York, right?
Yeah.
And a free trip. She can stay at a nice hotel, and she just kind of like blows her off all the time. And it's, I think this movie is about Lydia having this perfect life, right, where she has the job, she has the career, she has the fame, the acclaim, she's got this beautiful caring wife, she's got an adorable child, she's got the 2 apartments that are both so gorgeous, and suddenly everything starts to spin out of control and she loses her grip on reality in a sense. And I think the Olga sequence in New York is very much a part of that, where she's like, oh, all these tricks used to work. Like just assuming, I think one thing you mentioned in your previous episode is the like how Lydia acts like a schoolgirl when she's trying to get Olga to go to dinner with her. And she's like, oh yeah, no, of course. Well, I'm going to bed too. I'm tired too, or whatever. And it's very funny because like I think she's just so flustered by the fact that she's not getting what she wants, and she's so she's just so like she completely unravels and spirals because somehow Krista's suicide has just completely reshaped her entire world and also reshaped the world's reaction to her. Now she's not getting everything she wants when she wants it. I think everything is spinning. I mean, she even loses her family, she loses her job, and she loses everything.
What you said about the memification of Lydia Tár is very interesting, because I think it plays into why I think this performance is so successful, in that even though Lydia Tár is a terrible person by all accounts and is revealed to us in the film, the memification of the character, I think, hints at the strengths of Cate Blanchett's performance, because she made her attractive. She made her somebody who people want to be around, even though she's terrible. And she made her somebody that, there are all these articles about that imagines Lydia Tár as being a real person and how she would move in the world, for example, what she won her EGOT for, or who her friends are. There is a Vulture article, I'll link to it in the notes for this podcast. There's another one at BuzzFeed. It's all of these sort of like things that the writers of these articles imagine Lydia Tár will move in the world. It says to the strengths of the screenplay and Todd Field's direction in that he created a genuine real world in this movie that you feel this is somebody real who's really running the Berlin Philharmonic. And so people are inspired to then see, well, what else can she be doing? And then it also the strengths of the Blanchett performance as this someone very attractive, someone people want to be around, even though they know she's terrible.
Yeah. I mean, it speaks to the merit of the film that I think a lot of people thought, myself included, that this was a biopic. I mean, I only thought that having seen the trailer and just hearing about, oh, she's playing a conductor, of course, once I read about the film more, then I'm like, okay, it's not a biopic, but it feels like one. And I think in some cases, I think it's poking fun at a biopic, or it's fun. It's like playing with all these, like, it's like we're not used to seeing movies about real people that kind of show them like really completely like dissolving into chaos, right?
Yeah.
Especially like awards contender biopics, they tend to be very like Wikipedia entry. They're very cookie cutter. They're very and then seeing Tar, which is just a completely singular, very unsettling story about this woman who feels real to us, and because she's so impressively crafted and played and executed, but is also, she's fictionalized, and she inhabits this very real space of, we know, like, this movie really takes shape around all the things that aren't being said about her in the press or anything. I mean, I do appreciate how they do bring in social media towards the end of it, but she's so, at that point, by the time she sees that TikTok or whatever, she's so detached from reality that I don't think even register for her that if she's getting hate online and I'm glad we're not seeing like streams of tweets or anything about her. I mean, we see some, but I feel like by the time social media catches up to her, I think she's already kind of too far gone to even care.
Yeah, you're right. The social media comments in this movie are very funny. But also I think what I love about it is whatever app they came with where you're filming somebody, but you're also texting about them. Like, somebody make that app, because that app is very funny. I really do
love. I love that concept. Although it scares me, but I do love it. And I think that's a really great use of social media, especially when she's in Placido Domingo's room and she thinks she's being ironic. I had no idea what that meant when I first saw the film. I don't know anything about Placido Domingo, and then having read about the film and kind of read all these little, metatextual references, I'm like, oh wow, that's smart. And you just wouldn't catch it if you didn't know. And again, like seeing it, like much like with Stanley Kubrick's movies, the more you watch it, I think the more they reveal themselves to you, the more questions you have, the more things you have to chew on. And I love that this movie doesn't really offer any easy answers. I mean, even, I call the ending a joke, but I've even read reviews that say the ending is somewhat of a, maybe not like a reemergence of her, but it's also, she's still working and she's contributing to art in a way that the masses actually appreciate, which is like video games and cosplay, like that stuff that's mainstream.
The other thing that I wanted to talk about is the costumes. So that's the other thing that this movie, like, there's so many articles about the costumes of Lydia Tár. It's the same in that the memes are very complimentary to Lydia Tár. These articles about the costumes want Lydia Tár's wardrobe, especially for fall. And the film, one thing I heard from Todd Field is that the film was shot in November in Berlin. And one of the things that he wanted that particular winter light or late fall light of November in Berlin to appear in the film, and it does. But also, of course, then you get the wardrobe because you are in fall. And so there are all these articles everywhere, in Vulture, in GQ, in Vogue, talking to Bina Dagler, the costume designer, about Cate's or, Lydia's suits, what she wears for rehearsal, what she wears when she's conducting, what she wears when she's just hanging out, or on stage with Adam Gopnik. And contemporary films don't usually get that much talk about their costumes, but this is something very tangible in that people see these costumes, they love them, and they want to wear them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree the costumes look great. And there are a number of pieces in the film, not just from Lydia Tár, but just I think a lot of the people in the film that I just like, wow, like that's just such a great look. I mean, like that's a very European, stylish, elegant look. And I love the opening of seeing her having the suits tailored, because I think to me that's just another metaphor for how completely in control her life is. And as the film goes on, she starts to wear more and more kind of like comfort clothes, or clothes that don't look as tailored on her, because again, she doesn't have that control. She doesn't have that like grip on reality and of her life. And
So let's do a couple of spoilers before we go. So
yeah.
my question to you is, what have you noticed on subsequent watches of Tar that you didn't catch the first time? So I have a couple of things. First, I never noticed that Anders and Sebastian go together to the final concert of Mahler 5, where then Tar comes and tries to take Mark Strong out. So they're in the audience for that. There is a very small cut right
Yeah,
before
wow.
of them sitting in the or getting their seats. So I'm like, oh, okay, which I missed the first couple of times I saw it. It just goes to my point about like if you watch Star more times, it rewards you. And then the second thing is sort of like a running thing that something that builds in two scenes, which I didn't notice until this last time I saw, is that the Kaplan guy, Elliot Kaplan, played by Mark Strong, at the beginning says to Lydia that he tried to bribe Francesca, the Nomi Morlan character, to give him her notes. And that she refused and wouldn't give him Tar's notes. And then later on, Lydia misses her notes on Mahler's 5, that she can't find them in the closet where she puts all her notes at home. And that's happening right as everything else is happening. So it's a fleeting thing that happens just like that. And then later on, when she tries to get Mark Strong off the podium, she screams at him, "These are my notes. You stole my notes." And so this is the first time I ever sort of put these three things together, that this is kind of a subplot in Tar that I completely missed the first three times I watched the film.
Well, I mean, this is what's so great about Tar, is that a lot of this stuff happens off screen, and you're Todd Field being, he trusts the audience. A lesser film would have made that into, you would see that scene of Francesca and Elliot Kaplan like conspiring, they would see something happen.
Totally.
You would see him take the notes, but you don't even see her get fired, which I love. I think that's like one of the grace notes of the film, is that going back to Olga, I still don't understand the scene when she goes to find her to drop off the stuffed animal, and she gets lost in that kind of labyrinthian tunnel system, and there's that like ghost, I guess, behind her. I mean, it's one of those like things where I'm like, this is kind of spooky, kind of, I don't know if it's real, I don't know if it's kind of haunting or what. And
although it has a real end in that she falls and hits her face, and then she's injured the next time we see her. But I agree with you. Like, I think that scene is more of like in the metaphorical space. And I think it's one thing that I like. The movie is a puzzle that you sort of, as the more you see it, first time you put it together, as the movie goes along, you put it together. But then if you see it a couple more times, you put even more pieces together. But I love that there is something just left that's unexplainable. Like, there was a dog that looked like a wolf. Why did she see that? Like, I think this is one of the pieces where it's just there unexplained, and it just makes the movie even more mysterious, better, and more interesting.
To me, that kind of goes back to like Eyes Wide Shut and The Shining, specifically, and I think even parts of like 2001, where there's just these elements, these sequences you just don't know.
And I can talk about Tar forever. I think so can you, Manish.
Sure.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been such a wonderful conversation.
Yes, thank you so much.
Before we go, let our listeners know where they can find you and your work.
Yeah, the best place to find me is on Twitter at Vertigay314. That's VERTIGAY 314. You can also follow my podcast at Pod to Be You, which is about romance films. Right now, we are starting a bad romance miniseries. Actually, Eyes Wide Shut is on the docket, so look out for that in the next few weeks around Christmas time. That you can find that on pretty much anywhere you find your podcasts. That's kind of the main place to find me. And I write here and there, but everything you want to find for me is on Twitter. So
yeah, and listeners, give it Pod to You a listen. It's a great podcast, and Manish is wonderful in it.
Yes, Murtada was on the podcast actually too long ago. I got to have you back.
Yes,
you talked about
I would
4
love
weddings
to
and
be
a
back.
funeral. Yeah, we'll definitely we'll connect again because I'd love to talk to you again.
Yeah, I'd love it too. And as I said at the beginning of this episode, this is kind of the end for Tár for the time being. Thank you so much for coming with me on this addendum mini season to celebrate Tár and Cate Blanchett's latest performance. We did 5 episodes that you can listen to all of them now. And like I said, I will return in January if Tár becomes an awards magnet to discuss whether Cate Blanchett might win a 3rd Oscar, what Tár can be nominated for and win. I think it will be, but let's wait for the Critics Awards first and whatever nominations come in January before we dig into its awards, because then it becomes something tangible as opposed to just my wishes for it to get all the awards.
Yeah.
And you can find me on Twitter at ME_says and follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at Sundays with Cate. And until next time, thank you for listening.